My name is Dr. Kate Walsh, and I've spent nearly 2 decades as a radiologic technologist and imaging specialist at Memorial Hospital. 19 years of reading scans, interpreting shadows, and finding answers in the grayscale mysteries that hide inside the human body. 19 years of delivering news that changes lives, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, but always with the weight of absolute truth. I'm sharing this story because silence is complicity, and I've been silent for too long. What I'm about to tell you cost me my family, my marriage, and nearly my career. But it also exposed a predatory industry that was profiting off false hope and endangering women's lives. So, before I dive into the nightmare that unfolded at my brother's backyard barbecue last summer, I need you to understand something. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you angry or scared or determined to protect the people you love, hit that subscribe button. We need to build a community of people who won't stay silent when they see medical fraud happening. Because what happened to my family is happening to families across the country right now. I've spent 19 years reading scans. 19 years staring into the depths of CT images, MRIs, and ultrasounds, learning to decode the language that bodies speak when they're in distress. I can spot a tumor at 20 paces, identify internal bleeding from the subtlest density changes, and read the story that broken bones tell about how someone's world came apart. It's not a glamorous job. Most people don't even know what a radiologic technologist does until they need one, but it's important work. Life-saving work. Work that demands precision, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to truth. So when I held that glossy 4D ultrasound print at Danny and Sarah's gender reveal party, feeling the cheap photo paper between my fingers while my sister-in-law beamed beside me with maternal joy, I knew within 3 seconds that we weren't celebrating a baby. We were celebrating a lie so elaborate and devastating that it would destroy everything we thought we knew about trust, family, and the institutions we depend on to keep us safe. The rage didn't hit me immediately. First came the professional alarm, that ice-cold recognition that settles in your chest when you spot something catastrophically wrong. The facial mapping was all wrong, repeated artifacts that showed the same generic features copy-pasted across multiple frames. The shadows fell inconsistently, defying the basic physics of how ultrasound waves interact with tissue. And there, unmistakable to anyone who'd spent years reading legitimate medical imaging, was the telltale overlay pattern of stock footage layered over authentic but misleading scans. But the rage? The soul-deep fury that would eventually consume my relationships and reshape my understanding of what it means to do the right thing? That came when I looked up from that fraudulent print and saw 43 people gathered around picnic tables in my childhood backyard, phones already out and recording, waiting for the gender reveal that would cap off this perfect August evening. That's when the fury started building in my throat like acid, because I realized I was about to become the villain in someone else's fairy tale. Sarah was glowing. Actually glowing, not in the cliché way people describe pregnant women, but with that particular luminescence that comes from believing you're carrying the future in your belly. She had that beatific smile that pregnant women wear when they're still in the magical phase, before morning sickness becomes debilitating and before the reality of childbirth starts keeping them awake at night. She kept touching her abdomen, not in the performative way some people do for social media, but with genuine tenderness, like she was already bonding with what she thought was growing inside her. "Kate, look at this profile," she said, holding up the print for what had to be the 50th time that evening. "And listen to this heartbeat recording." She pressed a button on some ridiculous plush toy that was supposed to play her baby's heartbeat, a sound file that was too clean, too perfectly rhythmic, too mechanically precise to be real. Actual fetal hearts don't beat like metronomes. They hiccup and stutter and speed up and slow down because they're real, messy, developing organs still learning how to sustain life. I wanted to grab that stupid toy and hurl it across the yard. I wanted to shake everyone at that party and scream that they were celebrating a medical emergency, not a pregnancy. But I also knew that in exactly 90 seconds, when that confetti cannon went off and we all found out whether Sarah was supposedly having a boy or a girl, this would stop being a private delusion and become a public commitment. Once 43 people posted photos to Instagram and Facebook announcing Sarah's pregnancy. Once the family group chat started buzzing with baby name suggestions and nursery color schemes, the lie would metastasize beyond anything we could quietly correct. And if you're watching this thinking that you would have handled it differently, that you would have spoken up immediately without worrying about the social consequences, then please hit the like button and let me know in the comments what you think you would have done. Because I'm betting that when you really think about it, when you imagine yourself in that moment trying to destroy someone's happiness based on your professional expertise, you'll understand why I hesitated. You'll understand why I made the choice that still haunts me every single night. 90 seconds until the pin hit the balloon. 90 seconds to decide whether to stop a party or prevent a disaster that could cost Sarah her life. I caught my brother Danny's eye across the patio and jerked my head toward the house. Danny. Kitchen. Now. Dude, you're going to miss the big moment. Sarah's been planning this reveal for Danny. Now. Something in my voice, some edge that cut through his party buzz and activated his older brother protective instincts, made him follow me inside without another word. I closed the sliding door behind us and turned to face him, trying to figure out how to detonate someone's world as gently as possible. Through the kitchen window, I could see Sarah arranging people for photos, directing the confetti cannon setup with the focused intensity of someone who'd been dreaming about this moment for months. Danny, I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to trust my professional judgment. That ultrasound print Sarah's been showing everyone? It's not real. It's fake. Manufactured. There's no baby in that image. He laughed. Actually laughed, that dismissive chuckle that older brother's perfect when their little sisters are being ridiculous. What do you mean it's not real? She got it yesterday at that boutique downtown, the one that specializes in keepsake scans. You know, precious moments imaging? They do the fancy 3D and 4D prints that regular doctors don't bother with. Danny, listen to me. I've been reading ultrasounds for 19 years. I can identify artifacts and anomalies that most people would never notice. The facial features in that print are stock images layered over real tissue scans. The heartbeat recording is looped audio from a sound library. There's no intrauterine pregnancy in that image. There's something else entirely, something that needs immediate medical attention. The color started draining from his face, but he shook his head like he could physically reject what I was telling him. You're wrong. You have to be wrong. Sarah's been experiencing all the pregnancy symptoms. Morning sickness, breast tenderness, missed periods, food aversions, all of which can be explained by a complex ovarian mass. Which is what I think we're actually looking at in these scans. Danny, I'm not saying this to hurt Sarah or to ruin your celebration. I'm saying this because if I'm right, she needs real medical imaging and possibly emergency intervention. And if this gender reveal goes forward, if 43 people start posting about Sarah's pregnancy on social media, it's going to be infinitely harder to walk back this narrative and get her proper care. You think? You think? His voice was rising, and I could hear the party continuing outside, oblivious to the earthquake happening 10 feet away from their celebration. You're going to destroy my wife's happiness, our entire family's joy, because you think something might be wrong with a scan you looked at for 30 seconds? That's when the pain hit me, sharp and clean as a scalpel between my ribs. Because I realized that no matter what I said, no matter how right I was, no matter how much medical evidence I could provide, I was going to become the enemy. The jealous sister-in-law who couldn't stand to see Sarah happy. The control freak who had to impose her expertise on everyone else's joy. The bitter, childless woman who spent too much time around sick people and had forgotten how to recognize healthy happiness when she saw it. Danny, please. In my professional opinion, based on nearly 2 decades of experience reading medical imaging, your professional opinion can go straight to hell, Kate. This is my wife we're talking about. This is our baby. This is the happiest day of our lives. And you're not going to poison this moment with your paranoid, jealous bullshit. He stormed back outside, leaving me alone in their kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of party preparation. Cupcakes with little question marks piped in pink and blue frosting. Streamers in pastel colors waiting to celebrate whichever gender the cannon would reveal. A banner reading Danny and Sarah's Little Miracle stretched between two cabinet handles like a finish line for happiness I was apparently trying to steal. I should have followed him. I should have grabbed that microphone they'd set up for toasts and told everyone what I saw in that fraudulent print. I should have been willing to be hated, ostracized, and blamed if it meant Sarah got proper medical care before her condition became life-threatening. But instead, I stood there paralyzed by the terrible mathematics of social dynamics, calculating whether I was prepared to sacrifice every relationship I had for the sake of being right about something I desperately wanted to be wrong about. Through the kitchen window, I watched my mother approach Danny, saw them have a whispered conversation that involved a lot of gesturing toward the house, saw her expression shift from confusion to disappointment to outright anger as she looked in my direction. Within minutes, the family consensus had formed without any input from me. Kate was having one of her episodes. Kate was jealous of Sarah's pregnancy because she couldn't have children of her own. Kate couldn't stand to see other people happy because she spent all day looking at sick people and had forgotten what normal, healthy life looked like. And if you're thinking that I should have fought harder, that I should have insisted on being heard regardless of the social cost, then turn on those notifications because this story is about to get much worse. Because sometimes the price of being right is higher than you can imagine paying, and sometimes the people you're trying to protect become the ones who hurt you the most. Mom came inside with that expression I remembered from childhood, the one that meant I was about to get a lecture disguised as gentle, loving guidance. Sweetheart, I know you mean well, and I know your job makes you very good at spotting problems, but sometimes that same skill can make you see issues that aren't actually there. Sarah is happy. Danny is happy. The whole family is celebrating with them. Let's not ruin today with medical anxiety, okay? Sometimes we need to trust that good things can happen without there being some hidden disaster waiting to unfold. Let's not ruin today. As if my concern was the problem rather than the medical emergency potentially unfolding in the backyard. As if my 19 years of training and thousands of scans read were just anxiety masquerading as expertise. As if the Hippocratic oath I'd sworn, the commitment to, first, do no harm, meant less than party etiquette and social harmony. So I made the choice I'll regret for the rest of my life. I swallowed my professional judgment, walked back outside, and watched my family celebrate a lie that could kill the woman they were trying to honor. The countdown started. 10, 9, 8. I stood there with my phone out like everyone else, recording the moment for posterity, playing my part in documenting what would soon become evidence of collective delusion. 7, 6, 5. Sarah and Danny stood together in the center of the circle, her hands protectively cradling her abdomen, his arms wrapped around her shoulders like he could shield her from any possibility of sadness. 4, 3, 2. The confetti cannon exploded in a shower of pink. The cheer that went up could probably be heard 4 blocks away. People were crying with joy, actual tears streaming down faces as they rushed to embrace Sarah and Danny. Hugs were being exchanged with the fervor of people who'd just witnessed a miracle. Phones were snapping photos and recording videos that would be uploaded to social media within minutes with captions like, "Baby girl Walsh is on the way," and "Auntie Kate can't wait to spoil her new niece." I smiled and clapped and hugged people and said all the appropriate things while feeling like I was watching everything unfold through bulletproof glass. This wasn't celebration. This was a wake for the relationships I was about to lose, a funeral for the trust that had taken decades to build and would be destroyed in a matter of hours. Because I knew, with the same cold certainty that let me read malignancies in mammograms or spot internal bleeding in trauma scans, that this joy was going to curdle into something much darker very soon. And I was going to be blamed for all of it. The party continued for 3 more hours. I watched people take turns posing with Sarah, everyone wanting photos with the glowing mother-to-be. I listened to toasts about the future, about the legacy Danny and Sarah were creating, about how this baby was going to be so loved by such an enormous extended family. I watched my mother start a list of potential baby names, writing them in her careful cursive on a piece of stationery that she'd probably keep as a memento of this perfect evening. The whole time, I kept studying Sarah's face and body language, looking for signs that something was wrong. The professional part of my brain that never fully switches off was cataloging small details. The way she shifted her weight from foot to foot, the barely perceptible grimaces when she laughed too hard, the pallor that was becoming more noticeable as the evening wore on, and the party lights created sharper shadows across her features. 3 hours and 17 minutes after the gender reveal, while people were still nursing beers and picking at leftover cake, Sarah started looking genuinely unwell. She kept pressing her hand to her lower right abdomen with a grimace that she was trying unsuccessfully to hide behind smiles and party conversation. I watched her excuse herself to the bathroom twice in 20 minutes, moving more carefully each time, walking like someone who was afraid that sudden movements might trigger pain. When she came back from the second bathroom trip, there was a sheen of sweat on her forehead despite the cooling evening air, and her breathing had become shallow and careful. Every instinct I developed over 19 years of medical practice was screaming that we were looking at torsion, rupture, or some other acute complication that could turn this from a diagnostic problem into a surgical emergency. "Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice casual and supportive rather than alarmed. "How are you feeling? You look a little tired." "Just exhausted," she said, settling into a patio chair with visible relief. "It's been such a big day, and I think all the excitement is catching up with me. Plus, you know how pregnancy fatigue can be." But her breathing was getting more labored, and when she sat down, I caught the tiny wince she couldn't quite suppress. The way she was guarding her abdomen, the slight gray tinge to her skin, the careful way she was controlling her breathing, everything pointed to an acute abdominal process that needed immediate evaluation. "I work at Memorial, and I have access to the imaging department even after hours," I said, trying to present this as a convenient perk rather than an emergency intervention. "We could go get a quick ultrasound right now, just to check on the baby and make sure everything's developing normally. It would only take 30 minutes, and then you'd have official medical images to show your OB at your next appointment." The word baby felt like poison in my mouth, but I knew it was the only way to get her to agree to proper medical imaging without triggering family resistance about me being overly dramatic. "Really? You could do that tonight?" "Absolutely. Let me just tell Danny we're going, and we can head over there right now." 25 minutes later, we were pulling into the Memorial Hospital parking lot. Danny drove while Sarah dozed fitfully in the passenger seat, and I sat in the back calculating exactly how much pain medication it would take to dull the agony of being right about something I desperately wanted to be wrong about. The ultrasound tech on call was Maria Santos, someone I'd trained personally 2 years earlier. Professional, efficient, discreet enough to know better than to ask too many questions when I requested after-hours access to an imaging room for what I described as a family favor. I explained to Sarah that we needed to do a more comprehensive scan than what she'd gotten at the boutique, just to get higher quality images and more detailed measurements for her obstetrician. The lie came so easily it scared me. I squeezed the ultrasound gel onto Sarah's abdomen and positioned the transducer, and there it was, a complex adnexal mass approximately 8.5 centimeters in diameter with both cystic and solid components, irregular borders suggesting possible adhesions, and absolutely no evidence of an intrauterine pregnancy. No fetal heartbeat. No developing embryo. No baby. Just a medical condition that had been masquerading as pregnancy symptoms while growing large enough to cause the pain and complications Sarah was now experiencing. I must have made some sound, a sharp intake of breath, or a barely audible curse, because Sarah's eyes snapped open and focused on my face with laser intensity. "What is it? Is something wrong with the baby? Kate, you're scaring me. What do you see?" How do you tell someone that the baby they've been bonding with for weeks, the baby they just announced to 43 people, the baby they've already started buying clothes and furniture for, doesn't exist and never did? How do you explain that what they thought was their future growing inside them is actually a medical condition that requires immediate surgical intervention? How do you deliver news that will shatter not just their current joy but their fundamental understanding of their own body and the institutions they trusted to care for it? You don't. You call the supervising radiologist and let someone with more authority and less emotional investment deliver the diagnosis that's going to destroy everything. Dr. Elena Martinez arrived 37 minutes later, reviewed the images with the thoroughness that her 15 years of experience demanded, and delivered the diagnosis with the kind of gentle professionalism they teach in medical school, but that never quite prepares you for moments like these. Sarah, I need you to understand that what we're seeing here is not a pregnancy. What you have is a complex ovarian mass, specifically, what appears to be a large dermoid cyst with some concerning features that require immediate surgical evaluation. The symptoms you've been experiencing, the missed periods, the nausea, the breast tenderness, these can all be caused by hormonal changes related to ovarian masses. What you got at the boutique yesterday was not a legitimate medical scan. They appear to have used stock footage and artificial audio to create the appearance of a pregnancy where none exists. Sarah stopped breathing for approximately 10 seconds. I could see her processing the words, trying to make them fit into the reality she'd been living for the past 2 months. Then she started hyperventilating, gulping air in rapid, shallow gasps that made me worry she might pass out. Then came the crying, not the gentle tears of disappointment, but the raw, animalistic wailing of someone whose entire understanding of reality had just collapsed. Danny's reaction was different, but equally devastating. Pure, focused rage that needed a target, and I was the most convenient one available. "You knew," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You fucking knew this whole time, and you let her." He couldn't finish the sentence, but I could feel the weight of his accusation settling around my shoulders like a lead blanket. I had known something was wrong. I had participated in the celebration rather than preventing it. I had chosen social comfort over medical responsibility, and now Sarah was paying the price for my cowardice. "I tried to warn you," I said, but the words sounded pathetic even to me. "I pulled you aside. I told you what I saw. You told me you thought something might be wrong. You didn't tell me my wife wasn't actually pregnant. You didn't tell me we were celebrating a lie. You let us make fools of ourselves in front of our entire family." And there it was. The truth I'd been trying to avoid, my hesitation, my desire to be wrong, my unwillingness to be the villain in their story, had actually made everything worse. If I'd spoken up immediately, if I'd been willing to be hated in service of medical accuracy, we could have avoided the public celebration, the social media announcements, the emotional investment that made this diagnosis infinitely more traumatic. They admitted Sarah that night for urgent surgical consultation. The oncology and gynecology teams were paged for immediate evaluation. Consent forms were signed under fluorescent lights that made everyone look like they were already dying. Family members were called with updates that evolved from routine procedure to "we need to remove a significant mass" to "pathology will determine our next steps." I became a ghost in the hospital waiting room. People acknowledged my presence with curt nods, but excluded me from the comfort huddles, the prayer circles, the whispered conferences about what Sarah would need during recovery. I had diagnosed the problem, facilitated the emergency treatment, potentially saved her life by getting her to proper medical care, and somehow become the villain of the entire story. And if you're still watching this, if you're still with me through this nightmare, please hit that subscribe button. Because what I'm about to tell you about the investigation that followed, about the predatory industry I uncovered, about the dozens of other women who were victimized by the same fraud, that's information that could save your life or the life of someone you love. We need to build a community of people who won't stay silent when they encounter medical fraud. We need to create a space where speaking truth to power is valued more than keeping the peace. The surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Minimally invasive laparoscopy if possible, open surgical removal if the mass was too large or too adherent to surrounding structures. Sarah would be under general anesthesia for anywhere from 2 to 6 hours, depending on what they found when they got inside. I spent that night in the hospital cafeteria, drinking coffee that tasted like burnt regret and trying to understand how I'd become the enemy in a situation where I was trying to save someone's life. The other family members had arranged themselves into a support network that specifically excluded me. They brought Sarah comfort items from home, organized meal schedules for when she was discharged, created group chats for recovery updates, all without any acknowledgement that I existed. The surgery went well, technically speaking. Dr. Sarah Chin, the gynecologic surgeon, was able to remove the entire mass laparoscopic, preserving Sarah's ovary and maintaining her fertility. The mass was indeed a dermoid cyst, a benign but complex growth that contained various types of tissue, including hair, teeth, and cartilage. Pathology confirmed no malignancy, no metastatic disease, no immediate threat to Sarah's life. Physically, she would recover completely. The laparoscopic approach meant only a few tiny scars, minimal postoperative pain, and a return to normal activity within weeks. From a medical standpoint, this was the best possible outcome. Emotionally and socially, though, we were all casualties of a war I hadn't known we were fighting. The family closed ranks around Sarah in a way that made it abundantly clear I was not part of the protected circle anymore. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Eye contact became a rarity. The text updates about Sarah's recovery were brief and clinical, the kind of information you might share with a distant acquaintance rather than a sister-in-law who'd potentially saved your life. I started noticing doors everywhere after that. Hospital room doors that stayed closed when I approached. Car doors that shut before I could offer rides. The front door of my childhood home that somehow never seemed to be open when I visited anymore. And always, the sound of curtains being drawn, privacy curtains around Sarah's bed, shower curtains when I was asked to wait outside. The metaphorical curtains that had descended around my family's circle of trust and left me standing alone on the outside. 6 weeks later, while Sarah was making a full physical recovery and my family was learning to navigate their new reality, I started building a case file that would eventually bring down an entire predatory industry. It began with a simple question posted to a local parenting group on Facebook. Has anyone else had concerning experiences with keepsake ultrasound boutiques? The responses started trickling in within hours, then became a steady stream, then turned into a flood of stories that made my blood run cold. Women who'd been given pregnancy confirmation scans that showed babies where none existed. Couples who'd paid hundreds of dollars for gender reveal packages only to discover months later that they weren't actually pregnant. Audio recordings of fetal heartbeats that played identical rhythms for different women on different dates. 3D prints with facial features that looked suspiciously similar across multiple families, suggesting the use of stock footage rather than actual fetal imaging. I spent the next 3 months collecting evidence. Screenshots of social media posts where women described discrepancies between boutique scans and legitimate medical imaging. Receipts from Precious Moments Imaging and similar facilities. Side-by-side comparisons of 4D prints that showed impossible anatomical features or physically inconsistent shadows. Testimonials from women who discovered their babies were actually ovarian cysts, uterine fibroids, or nothing at all. The pattern was clear and devastating. Unregulated businesses were preying on desperate hope, creating false reassurance that delayed real medical care and caused profound psychological trauma. They were operating in the gray area between entertainment and medicine, using outdated equipment, employing untrained technicians, and systematically misrepresenting their services to vulnerable women who trusted them with their most precious dreams. And because this affects all of us, because any woman you know could be victimized by this fraud, I need you to like this video and share it with everyone you care about. I need you to turn on notifications so you'll know when I post updates about the investigation. Because what I'm about to tell you about the legal battle that followed could be the difference between life and death for someone in your family. I reached out to Margaret Chin, a consumer protection attorney who specialized in medical fraud cases. She agreed to review my evidence on a pro bono basis, initially skeptical that we had enough for a winnable case. By the time I'd shown her the testimonials, the technical analysis, and the pattern of deceptive practices across multiple facilities, she was ready to file formal complaints with every relevant regulatory agency in the state. Then came Detective James Rodriguez from the State Health Department's Investigative Division. He'd been tracking similar complaints from other regions and was eager to coordinate our evidence with ongoing investigations in neighboring counties. What had started as my personal quest for vindication was becoming a formal probe into an industry that operated with virtually no oversight or accountability. The investigation expanded over 6 months. We documented cases across 3 counties involving 5 different boutique ultrasound facilities. Women who'd been told they were having twins when they weren't pregnant at all. Couples who'd spent thousands on extended imaging packages to track a pregnancy that was actually a medical condition requiring urgent treatment. Families who'd announced pregnancies, planned baby showers, and prepared nurseries based on deliberately fraudulent scans. The technical evidence was overwhelming. Expert analysis of the equipment these facilities used showed machines that were either obsolete or improperly calibrated. Staff certification records revealed technicians with no formal medical training performing procedures that required specialized knowledge. Financial records showed a business model built on volume processing rather than accurate diagnosis. The more scans they could complete per day, the more profit they generated, regardless of medical accuracy. The psychological damage was even more devastating. We documented cases of severe depression, anxiety disorders, and relationship trauma in women who discovered their pregnancies were fraudulent. Some had delayed seeking proper medical care because they trusted the boutique scans over their own symptoms. Others had endured the double trauma of losing a pregnancy they thought they had and then discovering they'd never been pregnant in the beginning. The raid happened on a Tuesday morning in March, 8 months after Sarah's surgery. I wasn't present for the actual operation, but Detective Rodriguez called me that afternoon with a preliminary report: devices seized, employee interviews conducted, financial records confiscated for analysis. The facility's computer systems contained hundreds of stock ultrasound images, audio files of generic heartbeat sounds, and software designed to overlay fake fetal features onto real tissue scans. The owners, Marcus and Linda Sterling, had been operating without proper medical licensing for 3 years. Their technicians included a former retail manager, a photography student, and someone whose only qualification was a weekend workshop on ultrasound basics. They'd been systematically defrauding vulnerable women while operating under the guise of providing keepsake imaging services. The charges came 4 months later: medical fraud, consumer deception, operating without proper licensing, and endangering public safety. The district attorney's office treated this as a priority case because of the potential for serious medical harm and the number of victims involved. The trial lasted 3.5 weeks. I testified on the 6th day, explaining to the jury how to identify the technical markers that distinguished legitimate ultrasounds from manufactured ones. I walked them through the specific red flags I'd noticed in Sarah's images: the repeated facial mapping artifacts, the inconsistent shadow patterns, the overlay techniques that any trained technician would immediately recognize as fraudulent. The prosecutor asked me to describe the medical risks of delaying proper diagnosis when women trust fake scans over their actual symptoms. The defense attorney asked whether I was motivated by personal animosity toward the defendants, whether my professional judgment might have been clouded by family drama, whether I had any financial interest in the outcome of the case. No, I said, looking directly at the jury. I'm motivated by the fact that medical lies can kill people. I'm motivated by the knowledge that every day these facilities operate, more women are being put at risk. I'm motivated by my professional obligation to protect patients from predatory practices disguised as medical care. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The Sterlings were sentenced to 3 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to affected families. New state regulations were implemented requiring proper medical licensing for any facility offering ultrasound services. Consumer protection agencies issued warnings about the risks of unregulated keepsake imaging. The local media covered the story extensively. Headlines praised me as a whistleblower hero, a medical professional who'd risked personal relationships to expose systematic fraud. Consumer advocacy groups held me up as an example of how individuals could fight predatory industries. The comment sections of online articles were filled with support from strangers thanking me for my courage and professional integrity. At home, my phone stayed silent. No calls from family members. No invitations to holiday gatherings that had been annual traditions for decades. No casual texts asking how I was doing or sharing funny memes or requesting my opinion on random news stories. My marriage, already strained by months of investigation, legal proceedings, and the social isolation that came with being a whistleblower, quietly dissolved into parallel lives lived in the same house until even that became impossible to maintain. I'd won the fight against medical fraud and lost everything else that had made my life meaningful. And if you're wondering whether I regret it, whether I would make the same choice again knowing the price I'd pay, the answer is complicated. Subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, because next week I'm going to tell you about the other women whose lives were saved by this investigation. I'm going to share the letters I've received from families who avoided similar fraud because they knew what to look for. I'm going to explain why the personal cost of speaking truth to power is sometimes the price we have to pay for a functioning society. The envelope arrived on a Thursday in March, 11 months after Sarah's surgery. No return address, but I recognized Danny's handwriting immediately, the careful engineering precision that had labeled every project folder and technical drawing throughout his career. Inside was a single photograph, the original hospital ultrasound image that had shown Sarah's dermoid cyst in crisp, undeniable detail. The mass was clearly visible, its complex internal structure apparent to anyone with basic knowledge of imaging interpretation. Below it, someone had printed the boutique's fake scan for comparison. The difference was stark and undeniable. On the back, in Danny's careful script, "You were right about everything." I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. I hope you understand why I couldn't say it sooner. I hope you're okay. No invitation to reconnect. No suggestion that we could repair what had been broken. No acknowledgement that the family's treatment of me had been unfair or cruel. Just recognition, arriving too little and too late, that my professional judgment had been sound even when my timing and delivery had been imperfect. I keep that photo on my refrigerator now, the only family picture in my empty apartment. Not as a trophy or vindication, but as a reminder of the weight that truth carries when you're the one chosen to bear it. A reminder that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good, doesn't always preserve relationships, doesn't always result in the kind of justice that leaves everyone satisfied. Truth is a surgical instrument. It cuts cleanly through deception and removes what's dangerous, saving lives when wielded correctly and with proper training. But surgical instruments can also wound the person holding them, and the blood on your hands doesn't always wash off easily. I think about Sarah sometimes, wondering if she ever thinks about me. Wondering if she understands that I didn't want to be right about her diagnosis any more than she wanted me to be. Wondering if she knows that I would have given anything to be wrong, to be the paranoid sister-in-law who saw medical emergencies where none existed, to be remembered as the woman who worried too much rather than the one who saved her life by destroying her happiness. But I wasn't wrong. And 3 other women in our county avoided emergency surgery because the investigation I started shut down precious moments imaging before they could receive false scans that would have delayed their proper medical care. And the new regulations that resulted from our case mean fewer facilities can operate in the gray areas where hope meets exploitation, where desperation makes people vulnerable to predatory medical practices. These are the calculations you make when you choose truth over comfort. These are the prices you pay when you decide that being right matters more than being liked, that professional integrity matters more than family harmony, that protecting strangers from fraud matters more than protecting your own relationships from difficult conversations. I still read scans for a living. 19 years now, going on 20. I still see tumors and cysts and malformations that will rewrite entire futures with a single image. But I also see healthy pregnancies, clear surgical margins, benign findings that let families breathe again and plan for futures they thought they might lose. And when I see something wrong, something that needs immediate attention, something that could hurt someone if left unchecked or misdiagnosed, I speak up immediately. No more calculations about social cost. No more weighing relationships against professional responsibility. No more choosing comfort over truth, politeness over medical accuracy, family peace over patient safety. Because I've learned that the pain of being right and alone is insignificant compared to the pain of staying silent while preventable tragedies unfold. I've learned that truth doesn't care about your relationships, your reputation, or your comfort. It only cares about being spoken when lives depend on it. If you're listening to this and you've ever had a scan that felt wrong, if you've ever received medical results that seemed too good to be true, if you've ever had that nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right about your medical care, don't settle for a souvenir. Don't trust boutique imaging over legitimate medical facilities. Don't let social pressure or family dynamics prevent you from seeking proper diagnosis and treatment. Ask for credentials. Demand to see licensing information. Verify that the person performing your scan has actual medical training. If something feels wrong, get a second opinion from a licensed medical facility. If you spot technical inconsistencies or impossible anatomical features in your images, report them to state health authorities. Speak up, even if it costs you comfort. Even if it makes you unpopular with people you love. Even if it isolates you from social circles that value harmony over honesty. Even if it means becoming the villain in someone else's story about how the medical system failed them. Because truth, wielded correctly and courageously, saves lives. And sometimes, when everything else has been stripped away, when your relationships have crumbled and your reputation has been sacrificed and your personal happiness has been destroyed in service of professional integrity, sometimes that has to be enough. Even when it's all you have left. And if this story has changed how you think about medical advocacy, about the importance of speaking up when you see fraud or negligence, about the personal cost of doing the right thing, then like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this story with everyone you care about. Because the next woman who needs an advocate might be someone you love, and the next person who has to choose between comfort and truth might be you.